My daughter stood in that lawyer's office wearing a smile she'd been saving for years, absolutely certain that my brother's estate would pass entirely to her. She had spent the last decade making sure of it. But when the attorney reached the third page of the will and read my name aloud, that smile didn't just fade. It shattered. And what came next, none of us in that room were prepared for. Before we go further, please subscribe to the Honey Revenge channel and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. The morning my brother passed, I was on my back porch in Millbrook, Tennessee, drinking coffee and watching a pair of cardinals fight over the bird feeder my wife had hung before she got sick. My phone buzzed on the patio table. My daughter's name lit up the screen, which surprised me, because she hadn't called in 4 months. "Dad," she said, and her voice had that flat, controlled quality she used when delivering information she considered beneath her. "Uncle Raymond died this morning. The hospital called me first because I was listed as his emergency contact. The funeral will be Thursday." I set my coffee mug down very carefully. She had listed herself as his emergency contact. Not me, who had driven to Nashville every other weekend for 3 years to sit with my brother through chemotherapy. Me, who had slept on a cot in his hospital room when the treatments got bad enough that he couldn't stand to be alone at 2 in the morning. She had replaced my name on that form at some point, quietly, without anyone mentioning it to me, and now she was calling to deliver the news of his death, like she was reading from a memo. "I'll be there," I said. She paused. Of course. She paused again. "There's also the matter of the estate. Raymond's attorney will be in touch." She hung up without saying she was sorry for my loss. My brother was gone, and my daughter had just reminded me, in the gentlest possible way, that she considered herself the primary person in his life, the one who mattered. I sat on that porch for a long time after the call ended. The Cardinals had stopped fighting. The feeders swayed in a light October wind. I thought about Raymond at 17, teaching me to drive his pickup truck on the dirt road behind our parents' property, patient and calm while I ground through every gear 3 times. I thought about him at my wedding, crying harder than anyone in the church, even my mother. I thought about the last night I sat with him in that hospital room, holding his hand while he slept, the machines beeping steady and slow. My daughter had not been there for any of those moments. She had been in Atlanta building her career, which was her right, and managing her carefully constructed life, which was also her right. But somewhere along the way, in the last decade of Raymond's life, she had decided that being his niece made her his closest family. She had begun attending his business dinners, introducing herself to his colleagues, inserting herself into his world with the same methodical precision she brought to everything else. I had noticed it happening. I had said nothing, because Raymond was an adult, and he loved her, and I did not want to be the kind of father who competed with his own child for family relationships. But I had noticed Raymond had built his company from a single equipment rental yard in Nashville into a regional operation that employed over 200 people. He had never married. He had no children. He owned a farmhouse outside of Franklin on 40 acres of land that had been in our family for 3 generations. I had grown up knowing that land the way you know your own name. Raymond and I had fished every inch of that creek at the property's edge. We had helped our father build the barn that still stood on the north side of the hill. That land was family, which is why, when my daughter began spending weekends there with Raymond in his final years, bringing her husband and her 2 children, I told myself it was a good thing. Raymond deserved family around him. I just hadn't understood yet what she was doing. The funeral was held at a small church in Franklin that Raymond had attended for 30 years. The room was full of his friends, his employees, people who had known him far longer than I could account for. I sat in the second pew because my daughter and her husband were already occupying the first, along with their children, positioned as the immediate family. When I walked in, my son-in-law gave me a brief nod. My daughter watched me take my seat with an expression I can only describe as tolerant. She delivered the eulogy herself. It was polished and practiced, and it spoke beautifully about Raymond's generosity, his vision, his warmth. She mentioned their Sunday morning breakfasts and the conversations they had shared about business and legacy. She mentioned how much Raymond had meant to her as a mentor. She cried at the exact right moments. People leaned toward their neighbors and whispered about what a lovely tribute it was, what a devoted niece. She did not mention me once. I sat in that pew and listened to the story of my brother's life as told by someone who had known him for perhaps 12 years, and I thought about the 58 years I had been his brother. The arguments and the reconciliations and the long silences that meant nothing because we both knew we would call each other eventually. The way he had shown up at my door the week after my wife died, without calling first, with a casserole he had clearly made himself, because it tasted terrible. He had stayed for 4 days. He had not offered wisdom or perspective. He had simply been there. None of that made it into the eulogy. After the service, people gathered in the church hall for the reception. My daughter moved through the room with practiced ease, accepting condolences as though they were directed at her personally, guiding Raymond's colleagues toward the food, managing the event the way she managed everything. Her husband stood at her shoulder, solid and supportive. They looked like the hosts of a dinner party. I was standing near the window with a cup of terrible church coffee when a man I didn't recognize approached me. He was in his 60s, well-dressed, carrying a leather briefcase even at a funeral reception. He introduced himself as Martin Caldwell, Raymond's estate attorney. "I've been looking forward to meeting you," he said, and something in his voice made me set down my coffee. "Raymond spoke about you constantly." That surprised me enough that I couldn't respond right away. "I'd like you to come to my office on Monday for the reading of the will. Both you and your daughter have been asked to attend." I started to say that I wasn't sure there was much reason for me to be there, that Raymond had his own life and his own choices, and I had never expected anything from him. But Martin Caldwell held up one hand, gently. "Your brother was very specific about who needed to be present," he said. "Please come." My daughter appeared at my elbow before I could respond. She had the radar for important conversations that I had always found unnerving in her. "Martin," she said warmly, extending her hand. "I was hoping we'd have a moment to talk. We have quite a bit to discuss, I imagine." Martin shook her hand with professional courtesy. "Monday at 10, he said, looking at both of us. "I'll see you both then." My daughter watched him walk away, and then she turned to me with an expression that was almost kind. "You really don't need to come, Dad. I can handle the estate matters. You've been through enough this week." "I'll be there," I said. Something passed across her face too quickly to identify. Then she smiled. "Of course." I drove back to Millbrook that evening and sat in the same chair, on the same porch, where I had received the news of Raymond's death 2 days before. The cardinals were gone. The feeder was empty. I thought about what Martin Caldwell had said. "Raymond spoke about you constantly." My brother had never been a man who expressed things directly. He showed love through presence and action rather than words. I had learned to read that language over 6 decades, and I had understood, in my bones, that he knew what I had done for him, what I had given of my time and my sleep and my energy and my grief during those 3 years of treatment. He had known, and he had never said thank you in any formal way because that was not how either of us worked. But apparently, he had found another way to say it. Monday morning was gray and cold, a hard November sky pressing down on Nashville. I put on my best suit, which was 12 years old and still fit me well enough, and drove the 40 minutes from Millbrook to Martin Caldwell's office on Church Street. I arrived early and sat in the parking lot for a few minutes, watching other cars come and go. My daughter arrived exactly on time, which she always did, her husband beside her in a suit that cost more than my car payment. She was wearing the focused, capable expression she brought to professional meetings. Her husband carried a leather notepad. They had clearly prepared. When they saw me in the lobby, my son-in-law nodded the same way he had at the funeral. My daughter tilted her head. "Dad, you look tired." "I slept fine," I said. Martin Caldwell's assistant brought us back to a conference room with tall windows overlooking the street. Martin was already seated at the head of the table, the will in front of him in a neat stack of documents. He thanked us for coming, offered water, and began with the standard preamble about Raymond's sound mind and legal standing. My daughter had her notepad open. Her pen was in her hand. She was ready. Martin began reading. The will was dated 14 months before Raymond's death, which I noted without comment. He had updated it not long before he died. The first bequest was to Raymond's longest-serving employee, a man named Gerald, who had been with the company for 27 years. Raymond left him $50,000 and thanked him by name in a written note attached to the document. Martin paused briefly on that page, and I thought I saw him smile. The second bequest was a scholarship fund, Raymond was establishing at the community college in Franklin, funded at $250,000. In memory of our father. I felt a tightness in my chest at that. Raymond had never once mentioned this to me. He had done it quietly, the way he did everything that mattered to him. My daughter's pen was moving in small, controlled strokes across her notepad. She was keeping track. Martin turned the page. To my niece, he read, pausing only briefly. I leave the sum of $150,000 to be transferred within 90 days of probate. My daughter's pen stopped. The silence lasted 2 full seconds before she spoke. Martin, I'm sorry, she said, her voice carrying the careful steadiness of someone managing a reaction. Could you repeat that? $150,000, Martin said, in the same tone. Her husband put his hand on the table. I assume you're continuing, he said. That's one of several bequests. Martin looked at him pleasantly. I'm continuing, yes. My daughter set her pen down on the notepad with a small, precise click. I could see her jaw working. She had expected more. She had expected, based on everything she had engineered over the past decade, to be named the primary beneficiary of an estate worth well over $8 million. $150,000 was not nothing, but it was not what she had spent 10 years positioning herself to receive. Martin turned another page. To my brother, he read, and I felt my entire body go still. I leave the family farmhouse and all 40 acres of land at the Franklin property, along with all structures thereon and all furnishings within the house. I could hear my own breathing. Additionally, Martin continued, and I noticed he had straightened slightly in his chair, the way people do when they are about to deliver something significant. I bequeath to my brother the entirety of my investment portfolio, my business interests, and all remaining liquid assets. This includes controlling ownership of Caldwell Equipment Solutions, all subsidiary holdings, and all accounts held in my name at the time of death. The total value of these combined assets, as assessed in October of this year, is approximately $7.4 million. The room did not go silent. My daughter made a sound I had never heard from her before. It was not words. It was something more animal than that, a sharp intake of breath that broke off into nothing. Her husband said, "That is not possible." I was looking at Martin Caldwell, and he was looking at me, and his expression was the carefully neutral face of a professional who had delivered difficult news before and understood that his job in this moment was to remain steady. There is no error in these documents, Martin said calmly. Your uncle executed this will under my direct supervision. He underwent a full competency evaluation at his own request, 14 months ago, specifically to ensure that no future challenge could succeed. My son-in-law's voice rose. $7 million to a retired school teacher from Millbrook. He could not find the next word. He spread his hands. My daughter turned to me. Her face was a landscape I did not recognize. When had I made an enemy of my own child? When had the distance between us become this? What did you do? Her voice was low and controlled, which was worse than shouting would have been. What did you say to him? When? I said nothing, I replied. I haven't spoken with your uncle about his estate. Ever. Not once. People don't give away $7 million to their brother for no reason. They do, Martin said, and he said it with a quietness that made everyone in the room look at him. When the reason is the right one. He closed the folder and folded his hands. Raymond left a personal message. He asked me to read it after the will. Would you like to hear it? My daughter looked at me for a long moment. Something in her was recalculating, though I could see her fighting against it, refusing to let the calculations complete. Read it, her husband said. Martin opened a second envelope, cream-colored, my brother's handwriting on the front. Raymond had never had neat handwriting. It had always looked like someone had poured letters onto a page from a great height. Seeing it in that formal conference room made my throat close. Martin cleared his throat and began. If you're hearing this, Raymond had written, then I already know how the room looks right now. My niece is furious. My brother is confused and probably feels guilty about something he shouldn't feel guilty about. And my attorney is doing his best to hold everything together. Martin's mouth curved slightly. I want to explain, because I think explanations matter, even when no one wants to hear them. For the last 3 years of my life, I was sick in ways I had never been sick before, not just in my body, in my spirit. There were months when I could not imagine getting through another week. when the treatment made me wish the disease would simply finish the job and stop drawing things out. I am not a dramatic man, and I am not saying this for sympathy. I am saying it because what happened during those 3 years is the entire reason for this will. My brother drove to Nashville every other weekend for 36 months. He slept on a cot in my hospital room 11 times. He sat with me through the nights when I was too afraid to sleep alone. He did not offer me wisdom. He did not tell me what attitude to adopt or what perspective would help. He brought sandwiches from the place I liked on Commerce Street, and he watched baseball with me, and when I cried, he did not look away or pretend he didn't see. He was simply there. My niece visited 4 times in 3 years. I am not angry about this. She had her life and her family and her work, and I understood. But I want it recorded clearly, because I think there has been some confusion about who showed up for me when showing up costs something. There is a thing that happens when you are very sick. And the thing is that you learn, very quickly, who loves you versus who loves what you represent. I am a man with assets. I have known for years that my niece valued those assets. I do not believe she is a bad person. I believe she was taught, somewhere along the way, that security means accumulating claim over things, and that she applied that lesson to me. She may not have even known she was doing it. But my brother never wanted anything from me except my company. He drove 40 minutes each way, twice a month, for 3 years, and he never once mentioned the estate, never made a suggestion about the will, never positioned himself. He showed up because I was his brother and he loved me, and that is the only currency I care about. I am leaving him the farm because it belongs to him as much as it ever belonged to me. We grew up on that land together. He knows every inch of that creek. The barn we built with our father is still standing because he went out there every spring for the last decade and replaced whatever the winter had loosened. He did that without being asked. He did it because he cared about the place, not about what the place was worth. I am leaving him the rest because he earned it, not by working for me or building my company or networking his way into my life. He earned it by being the kind of man who stays, who shows up, who does not count the cost of loving someone. My niece, I hope you will hear this as the gift it is intended to be. You have $150,000 and everything your hard work has given you. You are capable and driven, and you will be fine. But I hope you will spend some time considering whether the life you are building is the life you actually want, or the life you decided to want when you were too young to know the difference. I hope you will call your father. Not about the estate, just to call him. Martin folded the letter and looked up. No one spoke for what felt like a full minute. My daughter's hands were flat on the table. Her husband had stopped writing in his notepad. Outside the windows, Nashville went about its business, indifferent. "This is fraudulent," my son-in-law said finally, and his voice had lost the steadiness it had earlier. He had an agenda. He isolated Raymond from his real family and manipulated him over 3 years of vulnerability. Martin's voice was even. Raymond underwent a psychiatric evaluation, specifically anticipating this argument. He was assessed as completely competent and free from undue influence. He also documented, in a separate addendum, the dates and details of every visit my brother made during his illness. 31 visits over 36 months. The documentation is thorough and specific because Raymond anticipated this conversation precisely. My daughter looked at me. The fury was still there, but underneath it now was something else, something that looked almost like grief. "You were there," she said. "All those weekends. You never told me." "He was my brother," I said. "I didn't need to tell anyone." "You could have." She stopped. She pressed her lips together. "I could have told you so you would have come?" I asked, as gently as I could manage. I wasn't keeping a tally. I wasn't trying to win anything. She stood up abruptly. "I need some air." Her husband looked at Martin. "We'll be in touch regarding a formal challenge." Martin nodded once. "That is your right. I would encourage you to review the competency documentation first." Raymond was thorough. My son-in-law followed my daughter out of the conference room. The door did not slam. She had too much control for that. It closed with a quiet, careful click. Martin and I sat alone in the conference room. He poured us both a glass of water without being asked. "He loved you very much," Martin said. "I know," I said. "We didn't talk about it that way. But I knew he talked about you every time we met. He said you were the only person he had ever known who consistently chose the harder right thing over the easier wrong thing. He said it so many times I started writing it down. I looked out the window for a moment. I was not going to cry in a conference room in Nashville on a Monday morning. I was 63 years old, and I had cried enough in the last 3 years to last me the rest of my life. "What do I do with the company?" I asked. Martin smiled. Raymond addressed that too. His management team has been in place for years. Excellent people. He asked me to tell you that your only job is to not make their jobs harder. Pay attention, ask questions, trust the people who know what they're doing. That sounds like him. He also said, and Martin glanced down at his notes, that if you were inclined to give anything away, the community college in Franklin could always use more support. He seemed to think that would matter to you. It did. It mattered enormously. I drove back to Millbrook that afternoon through the same gray November sky, but something about it looked different on the return trip. Lighter, maybe. Not in the way of happy endings. Because Raymond was still gone, and my daughter was still furious, and none of this felt simple. But lighter in the way of things that have been made clear after years of being obscure. The kind of light that comes when someone finally says aloud what you have privately believed for a long time. 3 days later, my daughter called. I was in the kitchen, and I almost let it go to voicemail, but I picked up on the third ring. She was quiet for a moment before she spoke. "I'm not calling about the estate," she said. "Okay." Another pause. Raymond's letter. The part about whether my life is the life I actually want. I waited. "I don't know the answer to that," she said. "I just wanted you to know that I'm thinking about it." "That's enough," I said. "That's a good start." She made a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been something else entirely. I didn't push her on it. I had learned from the best that sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone you love is simply stay on the line. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing particularly important. About her kids, about the drive back to Atlanta, about whether the Franklin farmhouse needed the porch repaired before winter. Small things. The kind of things that hold a relationship together when the larger things are still too raw to touch. When she hung up, I sat with the phone in my hand for a while. Then I put on my coat and walked out to the back porch, where the bird feeder was empty and the cardinals were long gone for the evening, and I stood there in the cold November air and talked to my brother the way I had talked to him my whole life. Without ceremony and without a plan, just telling him what had happened, what I was thinking, where things stood. I told him the farm was in good shape. I had driven out there the day before, walked the 40 acres in the gray October light, checked on the barn. The structure was solid. A few boards needed replacing on the north face, but that was nothing a weekend and some lumber couldn't fix. The creek was running clean. The land looked the way it had always looked, patient and permanent, and entirely indifferent to human drama. I told him I didn't know yet what kind of chairman of the board I was going to make, but that I intended to spend whatever time was necessary learning, and that I was going to start by having a long conversation with the people who had kept his company running through 3 years of his illness, without anyone ever asking them to carry more than they signed up for. Those people deserved to be seen clearly. I told him that his niece had called, and that I believed she was going to be all right. Not immediately, and not easily, but eventually. She was stubborn, which she had gotten honestly from both sides of the family, and stubbornness could work for you or against you, depending entirely on what direction you pointed it. I told him I was going to be okay. The wind came up off the hill and moved through the empty feeder, and it was cold enough that I should have gone back inside. But I stayed out there a while longer, because there are some conversations that need the open air. Some things you can only say properly when you're not protected by walls and ceilings and the comfortable furniture of your ordinary life. Justice, I had decided, was not what I had expected it to be. I had spent years watching people who seemed to play by different rules, accumulate everything while the people I respected most went quietly unrecognized. I had never been a man who believed that patience was always rewarded, because I had seen too much evidence to the contrary. Good people lost things every day. Quiet strength went unseen every day. The world was not reliably fair, but sometimes, not always and not predictably, but sometimes, someone who sees you clearly gets the chance to say so in a way that cannot be argued with or diminished or managed into something smaller. Sometimes the record gets corrected in ways that matter. Raymond had seen me clearly for 60 years. He had simply found a way to make that visible to everyone else. I went back inside and made coffee and sat in the chair by the window where I had been sitting since my wife died, in the house that had always been just large enough for the two of us, and I thought about what came next, not with dread, not even with the particular exhaustion that had settled into my bones over the last 3 years of sitting in hospital rooms and driving through Nashville traffic and sleeping on a cot that was 3 inches too short, with something that felt, carefully and quietly, like the beginning of purpose. Before you go, if this story moved you in any way, please give it a like and leave a comment letting us know what part hit you hardest. Subscribe to Honey Revenge for a new story every week, and click on the video to your left to hear what happens next.